Good afternoon. My name is Turner Bitten. I'm the executive director here at Westview Media. We are pleased to start our next event in our Candid Candidates series by welcoming Joél-Léhi Organista, who is a candidate for Salt Lake City School Board in District 1. Thanks for joining us, Joél.
Hola, hello. Yes, thanks.
Well, I really appreciate you joining us. And before we get into questions with you, I just want to let the audience that's watching know, please submit your questions live on Facebook. If I'm looking back and forth, it's because I'm checking for questions. The audience is free to submit questions, and I'll be sure to ask them as we have our conversation. But to get started, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and that.
Yeah, so I live in Precinct 1, which is Rose Park pretty much. And uh, I'm originally from Mexico, so I was born in Mexico City, and our family immigrated here to Salt Lake City when I was in elementary school. And we actually originally moved to like Capitol Hill, Marmalade area um, a long time ago. And so I went to my first part of elementary school to the old Washington Elementary. So like but that building doesn't exist anymore. But then we moved to Rose Park, and I've been here for a long time. And I was here when the new the North Star, the first year was open. I went there, then Escalante, and then the new Northwest. So I've been here in Rose Park when all those schools kind of opened, and it's home. Um, I've lived other places around the world, but I've always felt like Rose Park or Salt Lake City's home, and I've always wanted to prioritize as much as possible to live here. Um, and and yeah, I love it here. It's there's so many reasons to love it here because first of all, I love living in Rose Park because I don't live downtown. I don't have to deal with downtown stuff, but I can get to downtown in like 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And then I can get to the airport in like five. Well, I should probably get there in 10 minutes, not 5 minutes, but if I'm not speeding. But yeah, I live really close to the airport, so it's nice when I travel to just come back home. But yeah, I just love it. And the place I used to get a haircut um, here on Redwood Road, she fees the business owner. I love it there because every time I would get a haircut, it's been different now because of the pandemic, but before you can hear like at least five different languages that are not English or Spanish, right? So that's a lot of different languages that I would just hear being in the community or going into Lucky's, the store, or just like I just love being here because it just feels like home.
Yeah, I agree. I think the West Side is the best kept secret in Salt Lake City. So I hope not too many people see this and want to move there.
Yeah.
um, well, so you're running a campaign. You're running for Salt Lake City School Board. And I wanted
Yes.
to ask what you think the most important role that the school board plays is.
Most important role. Um, what's the governing, so if you think of government, there's like different branches, right? There's like the legislative, executive, and judicial. And when you think of the school district, the executive would be kind of like the superintendent. And then there's not really a judicial branch, but the legislative, or the one that makes the policies or laws, is the board, the school board, right? And it's really unique. I think it's a beautiful thing that school districts have school boards, just because I'm very big on like how local government really does make the biggest impact in our lives, and when it comes to schools and school districts and school boards, we can see that be manifested, right? So one of the major roles of the school board is to choose the superintendent too. So I would choose that one as the high priority, and not only choosing the superintendent, but keeping the superintendent accountable, because there's balances in government, right? So when you're thinking of the superintendent and the school board, that's why they're both there, because no, both of them have to work with each other to execute the vision that there is. You know, um, the superintendent um, is someone that's the paid, right, by the school district to be doing like the executive level stuff to really get everybody doing their job. And right now we have an interim, and the school board that's going to be decided or voted on, you know, this November and sworn in January, they're the ones that's going to choose who the new superintendent is. And that's a big role to play, to really choose who that person is. And then, as we've seen in the past, it's up to the school board to keep that person accountable. That's the superintendent, because if they don't, there's literally no other group or body that can keep the superintendent accountable, because the superintendent reports to the board, and the board can be like, well, based on your report or based on what you're doing, not only can we choose to have your contract continued, but also more importantly, and when you are doing a good job, like, how do we continue to support you in other ways, right? So because the board is elected by the people, the superintendent isn't. And so the school board really has to make that wise decision, because we've seen in the past how the school districts has had superintendents that have lasted for a long time or short times, and what the board's role has been and why they've stayed for a long time or not. But yeah, I think that's the number one role, is just the superintendent decision, choosing who that person is and keeping them accountable.
Yeah, thank you. So that is actually my sixth question, but I'm going to jump down there because we're on the topic of hiring. But a lot of folks believe that hiring is policy. And I think this is especially important for communities on the West Side when we talk about representation, diversity, and inclusion. So A, do you agree that the people you hire is a form of policy? And B, what would you do to promote inclusion and diversity?
That's a good question. Yeah, the school board usually doesn't hire too many positions. They just only hire a certain amount of positions. We kind of saw that happen this summer, right, with the business administrator, which was kind of a unique thing, because it usually doesn't happen that way, but just because of the superintendent, you know, change. To answer your first question, I do totally think that who you hire, who you choose for a position creates policy. And we don't even have to think locally here. We could just think of any level of government and how you appoint people, which would be kind of the hiring, right? Technically. So like in the federal government, the Secretary of Education is appointed, Betsy DeVos, and she's hired technically, right? She's paid to do that. And she's there, and what she's doing is a clear policy. Like, she has a clear policy and clear like agenda that's sometimes very detrimental to our communities. And so, yes, and that doesn't even have to be with the Secretary of Education. It could be the Secretary of any position in the federal government or local government or state government. So the same thing as a school district. So the person so the board doesn't choose every position, right? We're not choosing the school board is not choosing the principal of West High School. That's not how it works. But we choose the superintendent, and the superintendent then chooses that person, right? So, so to answer your second question, how, you know, diversity, inclusion, or, you know, in terms of like who we're hiring, I think, so I teach a course at the University of Utah under ethnic studies. It's a leadership course, and what's focused on decolonizing leadership. And last week we went over biases and how we as leaders have bias, and like our role is to, as leaders, to acknowledge what biases we have, and then whatever we are responsible for, to see how it impacts that, and then work as much as possible to address it, and not stay like pretend that it doesn't exist, because that's the worst thing you can do when it comes to bias. You pretend you don't have it. So I have bias, and so does every single other person on that school board. And so when we're looking at the candidates, there's actually a thing in place where there's we're having a outside group help us with that, because they're going through a lot of applications, and then they kind of suggest the ones that would be best for the finalists, right? And then that's where then we are going through those finalists. But I think generally the school board is looking for that outside group to help make sure that diversity pool, that pool is diverse, right? Because if it ends up being very similar people based on their identities as the finalists, that's a problem, because then that's like the 5-10 people I'm supposed to work with, like as the pool, and I have a commitment for diversity, but that doesn't mean that something that might not be seen as diverse is not considered, because within that pool everyone is similar, right? So we also want to have the pool diverse, and then from there it makes it easier for us, because we know everybody's qualified, everybody has experience, and so when it goes to those specific things that we're looking for in the community, right? So it's like, does this person really understand how it is to address a school district that's majority students of color, majority low income, majority biliterate, right? English language learners, and so I think those are like discussions of why diversity is important, because of how they've addressed those things. And when you have experience of not only addressing those things with your professional life, but because that was your actual experience as a person of color, right? I think that's a very unique thing that you can bring in. And that's why I'm a big advocate of more educators of color, or educators that are English language learners themselves, right? Because like me, I'm an educator, language learner, immigrant, and person of color, and from here, because when I taught, it was very different than maybe someone that wasn't from here, that was maybe from Bountiful, that's not a person of color, right? That just didn't understand, and I saw that be manifested when I was teaching at Horizonte. And Horizonte, you teach your units very fast because they're trying to catch up to their credits. So you have really only a week to really build trust with them before you can kind of then go into your units. And 1 week to really build trust is really fast, and you got to do it real fast. And I taught health, so my students are not going to be talking about, asking questions, because they should ask questions, right? That's the best thing. But they're not going to ask me questions about sex ed or drugs or substances or about anything about their mental health until they trust me. And one of the biggest things that helped them to trust me was, some of them will be like, oh, like I've seen you in like the grocery store, or I've seen you here, or like I've seen you in the community. And that was a big deal for them to be like, when I told them, yeah, I'm from there. Like I like it helps them be like, oh, okay, this person really does know and does care. And even if you want from that, which is totally fine, because the superintendent that we're going to choose maybe isn't from here, but I think being from here is a big important thing that I would look for in terms of diversity, because there are well qualified people from Utah that are people of color that could be in this position. They don't need to be a person of color, or not even a person of color, but like a person from outside of Utah is really hard to help them understand why the culture here in Salt Lake City, in our school district, is a certain way. And so I'm a big advocate of like growing leaders locally and helping and supporting local leaders. That's literally the whole university course I teach. And so when I'm looking at that, I am biased of that. I'm biased of like, I would love someone that's from here, from Utah, and or not. When I say from Utah, they lived here more than 10 years, right? So they understand it. And of course I'm biased if I would love a superintendent that's an educator, right? That was an educator, right? Or I would love it, there's a bunch of biases I have. And so, but that's why we have more than one person choosing the position, right? It's not just me, but we have all these other school board members seeing why they think it would be a good element of that person being in that position.
Thank you. So it's kind of on a similar topic. Our first question is from Charlotte, and she asks, a past West Side School Board representative has been very confrontational and combative with the superintendent. Would you adopt a similar approach, or kind of getting in, I guess, what is your approach to being a member of a team?
I'm transparent. And so again, I'm going to just bring it down to being like how I'm a teacher and I try to teach these values to people and how I have them myself and why I think they're important. So when I'm teaching leaders, I tell them that they should be transparent. And this comes rooted from, so I'm from Mexico, and so the Aztecs were kind of like the people there, and they have 20 days in their calendar, and one of them is water, and it represents being transparent, water. And the Aztecs would go to war on that day because war back then was, if I win, then I want this. And if I lose, you get what you want, right? It was very like transactional, very negotiated, even though it was war. It's kind of hard to understand now because war is very different now, right? It's kind of endless war. But back then it was like, whoever wins, they get what they wanted. Was it the land? Was it whatever? So it was very important for the Aztecs to go to war on that day on being transparent, because you're transparent when you're having a conflict. If there is a conflict is not bad. Conflict is very important. And that's why I think boards or any team or anything, once there's a issue and you're able to be transparent about where you stand and what you want and what you need, and then you understand what the goal is, then we move towards that, right? And so in the past, everybody has different approaches of how to do different things, right? I think the example is someone being the only male of color on a majority board of white women, right? And he was perceived as a threat, which is a very historical common thing for a man of color to be in a space and be perceived as a threat. Because there is someone right now, right? There's general ways of how people approach things, or like when Luz Robles, my senator, is at the state capitol saying things very passionately, she's perceived as being fierce or like Latina or whatever. And even if someone had the same passion of whatever the issue they're talking about, the perception and identities of a person are going to be perceived by whoever's perceiving it. And I think it's a problem to be thinking that because people might not be thinking about that, right? My master's from Columbia University is in sociology, of like that, literally, like your identities are going to be perceived by others in different ways. And the more you kind of know how people perceive you, the better. But that doesn't mean that you should not be authentic. So when I'm there on the board, speaking my mind and truth, I'm going to be transparent. I'm a very nice person. If people know me, people that know me, I'm a very nice person. But when it comes to justice or injustices, I was elected to be on there to represent that, because I don't think we should be quiet about injustices, right? When the school district is violating federal law, the person should not be quiet. And I think there are certain cases where that happened. However, disrespect is something that a leader should never be doing. Like, people should never be disrespecting anyone. And so you will see me never disrespecting anyone, especially attacking identities or people's like personalities, right? I think that's a very common thing to be taught in leadership, just generally. Like when you're having different opinions, you focus on the opinion or the thought or let's say, like I said, there's going to be many topics where many of the school board members are going to have very different opinions. And then after that discussion's over, we're fine, because we all are on there trying to do the best for the school district. And then we in the next item on the agenda, we're like, oh, we're all on the same page. And so I think it's very different, but to single out someone because of maybe their approach, people should think about how their identities that they have, and that why they're perceiving that person that way too, right? For example, if I cried on the school board because of a certain thing, like I really resonated with something and I cried, it would be very differently perceived than when a woman cried, right? And so I think it's very important. But my quick answer is, I'm a team member. When I understand what the goal is, especially when specific example was, how am I going to work with the superintendent? Let's say the person, my ideal candidate wasn't chosen for the superintendent. That's fine. I'm still going to work with them and keep them accountable. That's my job. That's what I mentioned in the beginning. My job is to make sure that the superintendent's doing their job, and I keep, whether that person I wanted or didn't want, like my choice in terms of I'm still going to keep them just the same bar as whoever was chosen in the end, because that's their job. That's literally what they get paid for. That's where our tax dollars are going to. And I'm elected to help make sure that that person's doing their job. And I think it's very important for the school board to have a good, healthy relationship with that superintendent and internally with each other. Because yeah, if there's disrespect, there's nothing's going to ever be done. And I know that very clearly. And when you're thinking of teams or leading or being part of one, you want to support the compassion and the alignment of goals that people have in a team.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to respond to that. I'd like to kind of jump back up to some of the pre-prepared questions we have. It's very clear that you're very passionate about the position you're running for. So what was the moment that you decided to run for school board? What made you decide to run for school board?
That's a good question. So I graduated from West High School 10 years ago in 2010. Back then, I did the IB program at West, the International Baccalaureate program. And you're supposed to write a thesis, like an extended essay it's called, and you can write it on anything. I wrote mine 10 years ago, titled Closing the Academic Achievement Gap Between the Latinos and White Students at West High School. I literally put the school district on blast saying, hey, like, why am I the only Latino in the IB program when West High School is now 1.0% Latino? Like, you know, that it doesn't make any sense. I think there's maybe some laws being broken here when I'm the only Latino in the IB program. So that was my paper. And I've seen injustices happen, not only through my experience when I was in middle school, at Northwest Middle School. I've seen a lot. And at that moment, I started to think about, well, if there's this problem, and I went through it, and I saw lots of my friends being pushed out or they dropped out by sophomore, junior year, not even senior year all the way. Who's responsible? Who's the group that has the most power in the school district that's responsible? I think everybody has responsibilities in some way, but there's still people that are literally responsible in some sort of governmental way, and that's the school board. And I was like, okay, so I paid attention more about the school board 10 years ago when I wrote that. I've been paying very close attention every single year for the past 10 years about what the school board has been doing, who is on it, which is very similar. People that was back in 2010 is very similar to now. And then the superintendent position too, right? What's the superintendent's role in this? And then 4 years ago, while I was teaching, I was thinking of running, but I was like, well, I don't know if I can run because I'm teaching or like whatever. So then we were with my family, I talked, and then my mom decided to run because we knew that someone needed to represent our community. If it wasn't me, then maybe someone else, and my mom was the one. My mom ran 4 years ago. She lost by a little bit over 100 votes. She almost won. And that's also 4 years ago when the presidential election people won and lost that year too. A lot has happened locally and nationally since then. And I think now is the time to realize that there's a lot of possibilities to transform the country, the school district, because of where we're at. I think people are finally realizing that what we've been doing has been unsustainable, including the way we run our schools and testing, all these lots of different things, right? And I think there's a lot of fresh new ideas that people have, and lots of ideas that have been proposed in the past but never have been implemented because there was no priority, a sense of priority, especially with racial justice or trauma-informed practices or, you know. So I think I made the decision kind of 4 years ago when I wanted to run, but I didn't run. My mom ran. And then I knew I wanted to be in this position. So like 2 years ago, when I moved back here from New York after finishing my master's at Columbia, like I went to the school board meeting and I went up to the people that were there and I was like, I'm running like in 2 years, just let you know. And so I just let people know. And then I officially announced in January, right before the pandemic started. I was like, I'm running. I made it very clear. And then I won the primary. And then, you know, I'm moving forward to win the general. And so this is something that I've been very put on as a goal to do. And it's not about just running or winning, but it's about actually doing the job, right? So I think the pandemic has allowed people to figure out if they vote, those people that are going to be on there are going to make decisions for them. And it's like everybody paid attention to the school board meeting in what was it, July, because of like, were they going to open schools or not? Like everybody started to pay attention finally. I think it was a good thing. And I think people should continue to pay attention because not only the school board, but the city council, the Senate, everything. So that's why I wanted to run.
Thank you. Let me just get down. So what do you view as let me give you a break so you can get some water. I'd like to remind people who are watching live that you can submit your comments here in the chat, and I'll be sure to ask them. Moving on, what in your view is the biggest issue facing Salt Lake City School District?
Well, the pandemic right now, which is very situational. Well, the pandemic just exposed problems that existed, right? Resources that we've been lacking, you know, the opportunity gap that exists, you know, the way teachers are treated horribly in terms of like pay and like support. And it's not the school district's fault. It's just like the general society, right? Like I think the school district is actually doing really much better with supporting teachers, right? It's just a general trend. The school, the teacher union here, the SLEA, they were protesting and walked out like a week or two before the pandemic shutdown happened at the Capitol, right? They were like, they left school, they had a walkout because they wanted more pay. Like people, teachers, parents, youth, everyone, staff have all like been very vocal about their needs for a long time. And the pandemic has finally helped us kind of disrupt everything and be like, wow, what we have been expecting from teachers is a lot and we haven't given them support. What we've been expecting from students is a lot and we haven't really like done it well. What we've been expecting from parents, especially immigrant parents, is like a lot and we haven't been supported. Like, and so the pandemic is the number one issue. But on top of that, ideally, by next school year, let's say in 12 months, the pandemic's not the situation, right, that we're in. But all of those things that were there before should still be addressed. And so, but who's going to address that is the superintendent. So, and for me, like in the end, it kind of goes back to the superintendent decision because there's so many problems, but it's the superintendent's job to have the support from the school board and the guidance, and then to help be executing everything, like everything, literally, like every problem that we have or any problem that anyone says is the biggest problem, the superintendent and the school board are in charge of it in a way. So the superintendent interim has been doing a good job. The first 3 weeks of his job, he had to report to the school board saying, this is where we're at. Poor him, but he's been doing a good job to really get us functioning during this pandemic. And that's all we can ask right now, right? It's all we can ask is just, how are we running this past week or this week on Tuesday, right? They were like, how are we running? How many students have enrolled? We literally had a hurricane wind. The day of school was supposed to start. Like, we don't even know. We don't even know what's happening. But in the end, the more we can support the people running things, and expecting just their best. That I think that just shows how resilient our school district, our students, our parents, our teachers, our staff are.
Thank you. We have one more audience question, and is it, how would you balance representing students, families, and teachers in your area schools?
That's a great thing. That's a great question. On my website, I made it clear that I'm prioritizing people, and I kind of put a level of like who would be prioritized for students are first, just because like all the services are for students, right? You got to listen to students. Like I was a student, as like it was so important to be listened to as a student, and so many. And then it's not a student's not just one identity. There's students with disabilities. There's students that are immigrants. They're refugees. They're students with many different identities. They're low income. Students' needs are very important, and so we need to prioritize that. And one thing that I decided to do right in the beginning is, and my campaign is, and it kind of, it's been disrupted because of the pandemic, but I want to create a personal advisory committee or body for me. Like they're supposed to advise me. Like it's just an advisory group for me. And all of them have to be living in Precinct 1. And it's going to be 2 people from each of those groups. 2 youth in Precinct 1. So 2 students, probably high school students, right? It just makes sense. We don't want to, I don't know if I want an elementary kid, my advisor, maybe, I don't know. But anyways, 2 youth, 2 parents that live in Precinct 1, 2 teachers. There are teachers that live in Rose Park and teach in our school district. There are. So 2 teachers in Precinct 1, and then 2 staff, non-teachers. So they could be a secretary, a custodian, a cafeteria worker, like some other staff. In the school sites, mostly I would rather have them be than the district office. And then 2 general community members that don't go into those. They could be, maybe don't have kids anymore and they just, that go to the school district, they're not staff or anything, but they're really involved and they want to be involved. So, or maybe they're a business owner or a nonprofit, they lead a nonprofit and they live in in Precinct 1, right? So that's like 10 people. That's a lot of people. The beauty about this is not only they're advising me, and I'm really understanding what their needs are. And of course, I'm listening to anyone and everyone that wants to in Precinct 1. But like these 10 people are going to be dedicated to really be giving me advice and keeping me accountable. Because if I'm saying stuff that they're like, I was in a big meeting and then they'll tell me, they'll be like, hey, they'll be transparent to me too. They'll be like, hey, you voted against our recommendation. Why? Tell us. Like, and then I'll tell them, or maybe I misunderstood, right? So there's an actual group of people that are dedicated to help me be making good decisions. The cool beauty about this is this position's 4 years. One term is 4 years, right? Within those 4 years, I believe in term limits, right? We'll see if I want to continue. I literally don't even know if next week we'll be alive, right? So I don't even know in 4 years what's it like. But if in 4 years, I would probably be continuing or not. Like, I don't know how the world is. But any of those 10 people, including those youth, they would be done with high school, can run for this position. And they should be confident and ready and aware about what the issues are. And I'm building leaders. I'm all about building leaders. Any of those 10 people, I guess the teachers and staff can't run because that's a conflict of interest, but any of the other people, the parents, those youth or community members can run and should run. And if there's 3 of them that are from that same committee are running against each other, I would feel confident and great. There's 3 people from this group that have been dedicated for the past 4 years being involved in these issues. And so it's not just about being informed and me making good decisions, but building leaders so that they're also being informed and making decisions when the time comes for their time. And so that's my little advisory thing. That won't be set up until I officially win because it doesn't make sense to have it until I win. So pretty much in November, I'm working hard and we find out the results and I win or something, then I'm going to be like, okay, open positions to youth, to parents, to teachers, and people can apply. And then we'll see and have that process so that we can have from November to January, getting those people ready and we can figure out how we want to do this. And I start running on that board, being well advised by my actual constituents. And that's something that I'm for sure creating. And I haven't really seen anyone do that ever in any position, but like I thought about it at least for myself, because I know I'm very well academically and teacher wise, and like I know a lot of stuff, but I also know that I don't know a lot of other things. I'm not a refugee, so I don't know that. I would love someone on my advisory committee that's a refugee. I'm not a parent. That's why we have two parents at least. They're going to be on there. They tell me the parent experience. I'm not a youth anymore, right? I'm not on TikTok. I'm just kidding. I'm not on TikTok. I'm just kidding. So like, I'm not a youth. I don't know what's happening in some things. I don't know what's actually happening online teaching and everything like that. I don't know. I need a youth to tell me. And so I'm not teaching anymore in this district. I need a teacher to tell me, or teachers, right? Two teachers. I need staff to tell me too. So that's what I'm doing specifically to do that, to respond to that. But it's just something that I announced back in January earlier this year.
Thank you. We got another audience question, and it's from Michael, and he expressed concern that there are a lot of students who are mentally or actually dropping out of the pandemic due to technology and other issues. And he wants to know if you have strategies for how we would identify them and get them reconnected and back on track.
I'm seeing this also in the university level. Some students just didn't enroll for the university semester because they're like, I'm not going to do everything online. I just don't want to do that. Like, you know, so I could only imagine this in the K-12 level. I think elementary school is a little bit harder to do that, being like, well, they can still choose, be like, I'm not going to do this. You know, they just don't do it, right? Their parents telling them to do it and then they don't do it. But in high school, even before that, there's people dropping out or not getting engaged. But as Michael mentioned, the mental health of youth and adults, everyone just is really impacted. We are literally experiencing a collective traumatic experience. Like we literally are, based on the definition in different ways. And it's not just the pandemic, like the virus, but it's also like these natural disasters, like from the earthquake, this wind, just like the lack of access to resources because of the pandemic, right? Where it's hard to get food and water, electricity, utilities. It's also hard to go work. It's just, and of course the racial justice stuff that's happening, right? Every young person of color, especially Black youth, are like literally just seeing everything that's been happening, and especially this summer, and be like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and why is school important if I can end up just being killed by a cop because I wanted to get some Skittles, right? Like, yeah, like a class seems a little bit less relevant if your racial justice issues are happening, or when like, oh, my parents got deported, or my parents got the virus, or I got the virus, or like whatever. There's a lot of other things of why youth would not think of why school is not even relevant in their life right now. Strategies to address that. I'm coming from an educator stance. I can give general suggestions of what teaching and teachers should do, which I think they're being trained on and supported on with professional development already. I heard it based on the Tuesday meeting. But I think it's very important to realize that a lot of teachers also left the teaching field because it's hard. And it was just, teaching online is hard. Like that's one thing, like, right? And so, but supporting the people that are actually providing the services, right? The teaching or the food or the different things, is the best way to address that. They gave the report on Tuesday about the students with disabilities and how they're trying to track that and how that is so hard too. And so the only thing I can really think of is like, how can we support all teachers to be really more proficient on applying trauma-informed practices? Because as mentioned, we're all going through a traumatic experience. And so how do we prepare? We can have all these different things, but like I said, in the end, it goes to the superintendent's decision to how do they implement it. To me, I think one of the things is thinking of how students' needs are stacked based on their identities, right? So students with disabilities are a good example of how they have very specific needs, right? Or students with English language learning needs, right? They're English language learners. When they're being taught something, they really do need a layer of needs support, right? And so I think it's like, I have some ideas. I've seen what other school districts have, but like my ideas are not as relevant to the situation until we have a superintendent that can do it. The superintendent's job right now is to keep things moving. We are going to have lots of dissertations in May, probably, like from all of these different universities, about how the pandemic and all of the situations we're in hybrid teaching, or just all online or in person, have influenced us, and we won't be able to address those things until we have some data. But from right now, it seems like we're just putting band-aids on all these things, because that's literally we all can do sometimes. But the biggest, one thing I do want to mention that I put on my website too is partners. The school district's not supposed to do everything too. Partners are key. And I think the school district kind of started to realize how it's important to maintain the partners that they have, right? UNP, University of Utah, the food bank, the city, U City, every partner becomes so vital in addressing those needs, right? If students aren't going to class, maybe we can support them by having them be engaged with some other program with Youth City, so that they're engaged in some sort of way. Or maybe rather than having a full high school experience, maybe for me, when I was in high school, it was good to do like an internship with the University of Utah to learn about how I can do film. And I did film as research. And that helped me be realizing like, oh, I should stay in school, because I didn't realize that I can create stuff. So there's a lot of partners I think we could engage, the parents and the youth that need the most support. But when it comes to the hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, water, electricity. Luckily, we're in the summer. Once we get into the winter, and if electricity goes out or food is lacking, that's, I think, where we need to figure out making sure that every student's fine. Yeah, and I feel that right now, with literally walking or driving in Rose Park and like it being destroyed with all these trees, it just shows me like how it's okay. I would trust me, I sometimes only want to go to the university because I'm so tired of like what I'm going through, and I can imagine the parents and students being the same thing. Like, I'm not gonna go to class because I'm tired.
Thank you. The next thing that I'd like to talk about is transparency with tax dollars. So one of the things that I hear repeatedly about the school district is there's just general either confusion or a lack of information about all of the different tax increment financing deals and the different things that the school board is engaging in. And I just wanted to know what you feel your role will be in helping promote transparency with tax dollars and those kind of financial deals that the school district is involved in.
Well, I'm going to be transparent first about saying that finance or numbers, money is not my strength. I'm running a startup right now, and I just had a class on that today, and it gave me a headache. I kind of still have that headache, but and is not my strength. So when I will see the budget, but I have I sit on national boards for nonprofits, including one that's 91 years old and one that's a little bit younger, maybe like 20. And I have to go through their finances, right? And as a board member, one of those responsibilities is making sure the finances are okay. But those are like nonprofits. When it comes to a governmental thing like this, you hit it in the nail. How are we spending the money that we're given in a transparent way, and what are the purposes legally in code, or what we decided on, or sometimes a board decided on it before you got on that board, right? Sometimes because certain budgets, it's very complicated. And so I imagine why people are confused. I'm confused already, right? I'm confused with my own taxes, like, right? And so I think it's very important to address it in a way where when it comes to board leadership and board building, board team, like team building, I made it very clear when I was did the interview in whenever that was in April for the vacancy, that the board needed to have a retreat, like a real retreat in July. They said they had a retreat. I don't know how the retreat was structured, but I facilitate board retreats for organizations, and those are vital because it is there where you help all board members be on the same level of understanding and expectations of everything, including that financial aspect. Like if a board member does not understand what it means in any kind of way of what their questions are, whether it's like, what does this code mean, or what does this line item mean, or what is this thing that the board voted on 2 years ago that's still relevant now, or like, that's the board retreats are the place where that happens. And so because you just have to all be on the same page. Just board members are going to be on there that's for a long time. They've been on there and they understand that, but I'm sure the first year they were on it, or the first month, they were not like that, and they might have forgotten that. And the same thing is, some person might be joining on there and they're a finance person and they could read it, but it's not connected to empathy, right? They're just like, I understand everything, but I don't understand, but they're not connecting it to the person, right? And so, yeah, for me, there's also like, there's certain documents I can't see myself as a just general constituent. So I don't really know the situation or the context until I'm on the board. And that's the problem, where once there's new board members, you have a retreat to move forward to make sure everything is moving forward and everything is in the same playing field of knowledge. And then the chair and the vice chair are all working and setting expectations on, like, when we have these reports or when we have these decisions, we give you the documents ahead of time so that you make the decisions that are informed. But they if you don't know how to do it, they share knowledge of, like, this is how I do it, to kind of scan or make the informed decision. Sharing best practices as a board is the best thing you can do in the beginning, so that everybody just starts working, right? And so when it comes to the specific issues that are there, I can't really talk about them until I really am on the board, or anyone's on the board, because there's some things that aren't shown to the public.
Thank you. So I don't see any more audience questions, so I'm going to go to my last two questions for you before we end. But let's say that you're elected in November. 4 years from now, what does a successful term look like for you? What would make you feel like you've accomplished what your goals are?
Well, the number one thing while I'm on it would be making sure that there's a superintendent, and ideally that superintendent stays. They don't end in 4 years, because that's what happened 4 years ago. When my mom ran, the superintendent search was happening during that election. They chose the superintendent that resigned just a couple months ago. She didn't stay for 4 years. So for me, I want that superintendent to stay for sure past those 4 years, and not just staying, but like there's a clear vision of like that person continuing, and also just like building off what they've been working on for the past 4 years. Because it does take a while to build what you want to do. So that's one thing in terms of the superintendent decision, and then seeing it work and flourish. The other thing is that advisory committee that I have for myself. It's like, we'll see how I am and feel based on if it's good for me to stay or not. Like, as a leader, it's important to understand and be transparent to yourself and others, to be like, am I still the best person for this position? I can't say that because I don't live in 4 years in the future yet, so I can't say that. But if it is yes, then I feel confident to continue. If I feel I'm not the best person, maybe it's one of these other 10 people, or maybe it's some other person, not even on these 10 people, then let's make room for them, right? And so that's another thing would be successful, is like there's a clear understanding of who should be the best person for this. And sometimes I might not be it. I for sure right now in 2020, I feel I'm the best person for that position. So yes, I'm very confident. But in 4 years, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe I am. But that's another thing. Another thing would be one of my things I really want would be, I would love ethnic studies. California just made ethnic studies like K to 12 all over. I teach in the ethnic studies division at the University of Utah. I would love to see ethnic studies in our school district, especially being the leader in Utah, being like, hey, this is how ethnic studies is a good example of preparing young people of color to go to college, think critically, and then have them graduate also high school, like retention and everything of high school. So ethnic studies is a proven research-based thing that really would be beneficial for our school district. And so if that happens, I would be so happy. That would be like a success for me to have some sort of ethnic studies course curriculum implemented in our school district. And there's many ways that can happen. And then the other one would be just like a cultural shift in the district where staff, educators, parents, and youth feel comfortable and they know how to report discrimination. I can tell you clearly that since I've been in elementary school, so that's past 10 years, that's 20 years in the past, myself and my parents, and my mom's a parent specialist at West. So she literally taught, her full-time job is to talk to parents every day. The parents and youth don't know how to report discrimination that they experience. They don't. There's also a sense of fear of like retaliation, which is against the law. That's illegal to have retaliation when you report. And that's not only with the parents and youth. That's also with the teachers and other staff, that they face discrimination and they are scared to report. In 4 years, we should have a cultural shift in the school district where discrimination is reported because they have the right to do that. And we actually are keeping each other accountable as a district to address it. Not just like say, oh, we have a problem, and then we don't do anything about it. But that's a huge, huge thing that I actually consult organizations about, like from the Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones. I consult organizations to shift their culture so that it's not even about reporting diversity. It's about reporting the discrimination. It's about building a culture where discrimination doesn't happen. But if it does, we say, oh, we messed up. What can we do to learn from it? And the school district should be a clear example of how we should build in that type of culture. And the superintendent is a key role for sure on that. The board is a key role for that too.
Thank you. So my last question is there any question I should have asked you today that I didn't ask you?
A question you should have asked me. Let me look at my platform. There might be something on here that I want to talk. I brought up because I have a lot of great ideas, and I can't keep them all to check. On here, I guess connect with teachers, because the teacher union endorsed me. I have a friend, he got his doctorate from Harvard, his dissertation, which then becomes a book. It's called the Teacher Activist Pedagogy. And so, as mentioned, our teacher union really is active, and they organized in February to have a walkout. They're well organized. And I think this is back to the culture of like the school district. We should have a culture in our school district where we support teacher activists and about what they care about. If they care about supporting refugees, then we should support them, right? That it kind of feels funny and silly to say that, oh, we should support teachers of what they care about, but we sometimes don't have a culture of that, and we do. I've been on the school board meetings alongside teachers when the school board is making a big decision and they're not listening to them, and there's like talk after talk after talk of the teacher saying things, and they don't listen. And I think it's shifted, but like it's a real thing of like listening and respecting teacher activists. And I think there's, like I said, my friend literally published about this, and I lead a national organization called the Education for Liberation Network, which is a network of teachers that are activists. And so I help other teachers, if they want to know how to organize, how to do that. And if the school district's teachers want to organize around issues, we should support them. We should realize why do the teachers care about this? Well, let's have a conversation with them. What policies do they want us to change, right? Well, let's listen to them. Because most of the time they're just mostly advocating for their youth and the students, right, that they're working with. And so that's why, oh, that's another thing too, I forgot to mention. My first thing on the thing is about youth is building a youth student council that's district-wide. We have that youth on our school board that's non-voting, that's expected to somehow represent all the youth in the whole district without having any support from the youth. Like, there's no systems in place. I'm the national vice president of youth for a civil rights organization, and I'm in charge of this high school youth board that's national. All of these youth on this board are high school students, and they represent their high schoolers, but it's structured where they get informed and advised by their own youth from their region and then from their states and all this stuff. The youth board member is just speaking by themselves, and I guess they can do surveys and reach out to their friends and lunch or whatever, but like there should be a structure where there's a board that advises this youth, and this youth is always going to our board meetings very well advised from their peers. And that's another thing I think we should be working on, in addition to listening to anytime the teachers speak, and especially once the youth is speaking in our actual board meetings.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you again for coming on tonight and for doing this interview with us. I really appreciate you taking the time to run for office and for contributing to our public discourse. As we wrap up, would you just mind sharing your website and how people can contact you?
Yeah, so I'm sure we can tag my Facebook page on this, but that on there, if you look, I think if you say more, I want and learn more or something on my page, it takes you to my website. But my website is jloschoolboard.com. And if you want to learn more information on there, you can learn all about the issues I care about. And also, if you live in Rose Park and you want, or Precinct 1, and you want a yard sign, yeah, there's on my website, there's like a request form, so you can put we can put up a yard sign. And check us out in October, right when you get your ballots. The teacher union and I will be doing a little car parade in Rose Park. So be on the lookout for that, to remind people to turn in their ballots. We're trying to be very safe in how we're doing everything. And but yeah, that's how you can find information from me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight, and good luck in November.
Thank you. Thank you. Y'all stay safe.
You take care. Bye-bye.